So we're at the Soil Not Oil conference, and we're just doing interviews with folks as to why they're here and what they're doing. So what's your name?
My name is Elisa Lee.
And are you with a particular group inside, I think?
Yeah, I've been tabling with the Beehive Design Collective, which is partnered with Restore the Delta, which is based in Stockton. Beehive Design Collective is a decentralized organization that exists in different capacities all over the world. And I'm also with Valley Improvement Projects, which is based in Modesto, where I'm from.
Okay, you wear a lot of hats. and this is so intriguing. What is the Beehive Design Collective? What are they about?
So I'm very new to the collective, but the Beehive Design Collective is a group of volunteer activists, artists, and educators that use intricate murals and artwork and graphics to explain and spark discussion around social justice and environmental justice issues. And by using art as a platform for education, they're able to capture a lot of very complex and difficult issues in a really unique and complex way, and also be able to hold a broader discussion that's a lot more accessible than reading it on a textbook.
So it's not just about bees. It's not a Save the Bees group exactly.
No.
It's just kind of the name for this collective that uses art for social awareness.
The name is intentional. It's like I said, it's not a top-down group. It's a very horizontally led group that has a consensus-based model, and similar to kind of this what you referred to like as the hive mentality. The way that these artworks are made are not by one person making the art or two people, but it's really all of them coming together, creating ideas together as a collective. And it's not only artists that are considered part of the collective, but also the people who are doing doing research, people who are interested in doing interviews with community members to actually gather these collective stories.
Right. So where do you spread your word? I assume you have websites and things. What kind of outreach do you do to try to get your art and your message out there?
Like I said, I'm new to the collective, but I know that it's really a combination of word of mouth and whatever that equivalent is for seeing them. Sometimes you just see the graphic around and people will say that's from the Beehive. But how Beehive works is that they conduct listening tours where they travel across different communities and speak with community leaders and groups about what's happening, what are the issues that they're facing, and what are the stories of resilience and resistance. And they collect those and try to metaphorically illustrate them in these huge graphics. And half of whatever they print in their final product actually goes back to those same communities so that they can use those graphics to educate others and create awareness around those issues. And so all of the money that goes from selling the posters and selling the patches and all the donations really go back to just fund these tours, the travel to speak at different events, and are really all about using it as education. So
it's a true nonprofit, as we say.
Nonprofit.
So many people are at this groups at this Soil Not Oil conference. This place is full of altruistic people who are trying to save the world and all. Some of your issues you said social justice, does it focus a lot on environment or not necessarily? What are some of I know you're kind of new, but do you know some of the top issues they're dealing with?
Really, a lot of their graphics can be kind of summarized as being a commentary on the way that globalization, capitalism, and colonialism have combined as these very complex and large systems that are much bigger than just one issue. And so it's not even a specific environmental justice approach or one topic approach. It really can encompass so much, including economic justice, racial justice, indigenous resistance, all of these different things that coalesce under that happen when you have these huge forces. So the kind of cornerstone graphic that took 9 years to complete, Mesoamerica Resiste, it really talks about the way that colonialism and globalization have extracted resources in order to create profit for a few. And that's a pretty common theme in the graphics, and a lot of other issues come out of that.
It sounds a lot like Occupy, of course, which is kind of what Occupy was all about. Just want to say a note for me that this is the top issue, is like how money and hugely merged corporations, we have these mega mergers, a couple of corporations owning the world, and them being in bed with government and having the money and putting all the politicians in the West anyway, it's just horrific, and it's like this behemoth. But
Right.
it's kind of exciting about groups like yours
Exactly.
and others, where it's like little Davids, a lot of Davids getting together to try to fight this Goliath, and people are getting creative, and but it's sort of the issue of our times, really.
Absolutely. And if I may make a plug, Beehive is currently working on a California graphic, which is part of what we've been talking about in our timetabling here. So that's going to include a lot about water issues and the drought, but a lot more than that, kind of our history as a coastal state and what that means for the kind of makeup that we have. It's probably going to include stories like Occupy the Farm and stories like and explaining where the school to prison pipeline fits in with the way that we have handled racial justice here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be done in this graphic, but what's exciting about the way it's portrayed and what I really respect about it is that it's not like you kind of pick out one part of the thing and like, oh, that's where they talked about this issue. It really all combines together and gives a platform for equal weight to everything, so that you're not looking at, oh, where did they talk about GMOs? It's really they're all coming together to intersect in different ways.
So in one of your images or art projects, you might see intersections, many of these things included in the one big. You said they're huge graphics, did you say? I mean, like, do you do any murals or anything, or mostly posters?
They're mostly posters, and they do have really blown up ones that we have on fabric banners that can take up an entire wall. And those are really striking and great to have hanging to do these listening tours, or really just Beehive also visits schools and visits groups that want to hear about these histories and just displays them and talks about them.
It's fantastic. What was I going to ask you also? Oh yeah, can you describe, I wish we had a visual right here, but can you describe any of the images or the recent, or some of your favorites that they have created?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to picture, I don't know what I'm seeing, mountains and animals and plants and workers, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Beehive has a very, I don't know if I call it a rule, but a guideline that it's not too literal, and that you don't paint it in words, or even in humans they use metaphors and the native species and native plants, so that not only does that really create a uniqueness and a sense of anthropological value to these graphics, but it also allows us to not rely on any stereotypes, really get to the heart of what's going on, not kind of relying on the easy token visuals. And so one that I really like, for example, there's a lot of, in Mesoamerica Resiste, it's a two-sided graphic, so when it's closed you see the kind of colonial capitalist view of Mesoamerica, as if you're someone who's looking down at it thinking, how am I going to extract profit? So it's drawn like an old map, and you can see the plans for pipelines and highways, and one of the symbols is the Inter-American Development Fund, which is represented as a giant bloated cash register, and as the money is pouring out, it becomes highways, and in another one there's a sinister surgeon, which is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and it's kind of picking apart the region to dissect and extract oil and DNA and water. And so there are these kind of themes and symbols that really show, and you can kind of have the academic research to go along with it, but it kind of has a visceral effect.
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds great. It's really wonderful. There's so many words spoken and so many people writing, and I don't know, I think that catching people's attention using visuals is great, because I was talking to someone else about how things like Twitter, short messages, people have sort of a short attention span, and it's kind of marketing. You need to grab their attention. If they get hooked, they'll maybe learn more and get more in depth on a topic. But it's good to get people's attention. And there's the whole right side of the brain thing with images. It's a whole different thing. It sounds great.
They're complex topics, like NAFTA is really talked about in that graphic. But most people kind of say, I don't have an economics background. I don't understand what's going on in the fund, and yet they get so captivated when it comes to these tours.
Yeah. So can you give us a little contact info for the group? Is there a website or whatever, or Facebook?
I believe the website is beehivecollective.org.
You could always Google Beehive
Design Collective. We do have you can buy the posters online, you can make a donation online, you can find out more by looking up Ryan Camaro. He is the lead for the California
Ryan,
project.
R-Y-A-N. Camero is
C-A-M-E-R-O. And I wish he was here to talk with me because I've learned everything from him.
Oh, that's cool.
But
you see, if nothing else, in case that was wrong, if they Google just Beehive Collective, that might do it.
Yeah, that might do it. I'm not sure if his contact info is on that page, but I'm sure that if you wrote a message to them or Facebook them saying, hey, I'm in California and I want to know more, we'll get you connected.
Yeah, just making sure that somebody watching this, if they're really interested, go online and try to find you. That's all.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Alicia. It's Alicia, right?
It's Elisa.
Elisa. I'm sorry, Elisa. I got that wrong.
No worries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for me, I think land reform is important because right now we see so much land concentrated in the hands of a few. And when people don't have a direct personal connection and some power in a situation, they don't feel very invested in it, right? Like we see a lot of decisions being made that are not in the interest of the land and not in the interest of most of us. But when people have a stake, when they can see that they have some power in a situation, they're not going to trash it, right? So I'm going to read a quote that kind of helps me think about land as well and how far away we are from a healthy relationship to it. This is a quote from Chief Seattle. How can you buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of the earth is sacred to my people. So I'm going to move into the 3 types of land reform that we're going to talk about today. The 3 ways that we can start interacting with land in a different way than we are right now is, the first is who owns the land. So moving from a space where we've got the hands concentrated again into the hands of the few to the hands of the many. The second is how the land is used. From so land that is used for private development in the interest of private companies or to the interest of the public, so for public benefit. So who owns the land, how the land is used. The third is how the land is governed, from private ownership to public lands to the people. So who owns the land, how the land is used, and how the land is governed. And if we've got all 3, that's the kind of revolutionary sweet spot, in my opinion, how we're going to actually get into a space where long-term we're interacting with the land and with each other in a new way. So how do we organize to do this, right? Like that's a great ideal, but how do we get there? And I'm going to suggest that the ways that we do that, these folks are going to have some insights into to share with us. First, we have to take it back. So in some way, we need to get to a place where we are owning, using, governing the land in a new way. And sometimes that looks like things that are outside of the legal processes right now. The second is that after we've taken it back, we need to make it better, right? We can't just grab it and sit on it. We need to be doing something that actually makes it more beautiful and healthy. And then the third is to protect it forever. And there's a few different ways that we can do that, where we're seeing people use. Right now, we're seeing people use adverse possession, squatters' rights. Brazil has a different version of that than we do here in the United States that I think Joelsie is going to talk a bit about. Another way is land trusts. So getting land that is previously being speculated upon, being used for private interests, getting that into a legal entity that is going to protect it for the interest of the public. Another is custom, right? You just are using it, and by the fact that you are using it day in and day out, it's more difficult for perhaps the legal owner. It's going to look bad for them to kick you out and start using it for their private interest again. So there's a spectrum of ways for us to move into land reform, and I want to hand it over to our panelists now. We've got about half an hour, so I'm going to ask our first 2 panelists to spend about 5 to 7 minutes talking about what they're doing right now to move us towards land reform, and then let Joelsie have a little bit longer time because she also has to have it translated. Oh, sorry.
Good morning. My name is Hank Herrera. First, I want to welcome you all on behalf of my ancestors, the Ohlone people. You may not know, but we are all sitting on land of the Ohlone people. In our research, we've learned that there's a legal principle called Aboriginal title, and it's important to think that, in fact, this land is the land of Ohlone people and the descendants of Ohlone people. So, welcome to our land. I'm involved with the Giltrap, the Community Farm, Occupy the Farm, Giltrap Farm Coalition. I'm also the founder of a community land trust called the Sacred Community Land Trust, which has the charter to conserve land for farming and food systems. And so I'll talk a little bit about the land trust idea. I'm also a founder and member of the New Hope Farms Worker-Owned Farm Cooperative, which is in Keynote, and that eventually will become a network of small family farms that produce healthy food for distribution and sale in communities now lacking healthy food, such as Richmond. So the land trust mechanism is a way, a legal way, for people to steward land and hold land as part of the commons. Some of you probably know, or maybe all of you know, that the idea of the commons disappeared in the 15th and 16th centuries when aristocrats who owned land and previously had allowed everyone to work that land in common started to put up fences and hedgerows, the enclosures, and kicked peasants who were farming and producing food for themselves and their families off the land and turned them into tenant farmers or landless farmers who had to move into cities. There's a book I recommend to everyone called An Indigenous People's History of the United States, which describes this process and describes also how these landless peasants became part of the settler colonizer movement sent to this continent to, quote, take the free land because there was no one here and the land was empty. Except that, of course, is a massive myth and lie. As part of the colonizer history of the United States, this land was occupied, always occupied, and lived upon by native people who had a very highly developed set of communities and a civilization that the settler colonizers destroyed as part of their taking over the land. So the land trust mechanism is an attempt, in our hands, our land trust, is an attempt to reverse that process by acquiring title and she's translating.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
I was distracted.
Yeah,
She's
sorry.
translating. Sorry.
Yeah, gotta have it. Go ahead.
So
Sorry.
the land trust mechanism is a way for us to acquire title to land under the terms of the colonizer laws of property ownership through what is either direct ownership of the land or an easement placed by the owner of the land. The easement then guarantees that the land will be forever in perpetuity used for the purposes of the easement, and in our case that's for farming and food systems. So we are working, for example, with a community in Oakland called the Africa Town Gardens and Quilombo House in an attempt to conserve a piece of land that they now have a garden, where they now have a garden, in order for them to have that land in perpetuity for that purpose as they develop for themselves a community that is self-sufficient. So I'll stop there and turn it over to John.
Thank you. For anybody that's wondering, there's translation happening here, and it's very important that you also understand what's being said on the panel, so we're going to continue doing that. John?
I'm John Huffman, and I work at the Giltrap Community Farm. It's actually the UC Giltrap Community Farm, which is a collaborative effort between people from the community and people from the university to steward part of the Giltrap farm. The Giltrap is actually 20 acres, and the part that we're talking about is a little bit over 1 acre. The College of Natural Resources has agreed to share with the community. For almost 30 years, people in the community have been struggling to get UC to explore the idea of creating a center for urban agroecology at Giltrap on the 20 acres. Unfortunately, after Occupy the Farm in 2012 seized part of the Giltrap and farmed it, the university drew a line across the Giltrap and said the north side is okay to be stewarded by the College of Natural Resources. The south side is going to be developed. We're going to bulldoze the soil and lay down cement and build a shopping mall, basically. So we started working together with people from the university about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago, trying to figure out how we could work collaboratively. How the University of Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, that owns the land and sets all the rules for it and holds title to the land, which has been stolen from the owning people. Basically, how can that be shared in its governance with the community? So it took a lot of meetings, hundreds of hours of meetings, dozens of times with many people from the community and from the university, until we finally hammered out a stewardship council and a stewardship assembly. It's made up of people from the university and people from the community. The good thing is that there's at least 6 or 7 people from the community as part of the council and about 6 people from the university. So what we say in those meetings and what we decide does tend to reflect what the community feels should be happening at that farm, which is a gigantic change from how it used to be. I remember when we had our main planting day 1 year ago, 2014, April 26th, a gentleman who was about 65, who grew up in Albany, the town where the farm is located, and he had tears in his eyes. And I said, "What's going on? Are you okay?" He said, "I am so happy. This is the first time in the 35 years that I've lived right next to the Giltrap that I've been able to set foot on this land." Mm-hmm. And I found myself really moved by that. I've been pushing and working together with people from the community to have access to it on a regular basis. Eventually, we'll be open 7 days a week. Right now, we're open Sunday through Thursday. There's a schedule that's up here of when our open hours are. And I encourage you guys to come and visit. If you have time to help us with planting and harvesting. If you don't have time, you're welcome to come by and harvest organic vegetables and take it back to your family and your neighborhood and your friends. Since we started harvesting in June, at this point we've harvested over 19,000 pounds of organic produce and delivered it to large sections of the East Bay community. Our goal is to have that food go to people who normally don't have access to organic healthy food. So I invite you all to join us in this and to also join us in the struggle to save the whole 20 acres, because the bulldozers are going to show up any week now. And we'll lose the opportunity to have that 1 acre become 20.
Thank you, John. So I think of those 3 types of land reform that I mentioned at the beginning, who owns it, how it's used, and how the land is governed. We've heard some examples that are happening right here in the U.S. Who owns it? We've heard from Hank about land trusts, people actually trying to have not just trying, but winning the title of the land, and then how the land is being used and governed. John went into some details of how the Guild Tract, which was, the issue was raised through on occupation, through political action that confronted the university, to moving into a place where the land is being used and governed in a new way. So I'm going to hand it over to Joel C., who's a militante and organizer from the Landless Workers Movement in Brazil, the MST. And they are the largest, oldest, and by many people's definition, most successful people's movement in the world right now, having won millions of acres of land in Brazil and redistributing it to the people that fought for it through occupation.
Morning, meu nome é Josi, sou militante do MST há 22 anos.
She's from Brazil, her name is Joyce, and she has been part of the MST for more than 20 years already.
O MST é um movimento dos trabalhadores rurais sem terra. Nós temos, esse ano está completando 31 anos de história.
Yeah, the MST is a movement for the landless people in Brazil, and this year, it's the 31st anniversary of the movement.
Estamos organizados em 24 estados, dos 27 estados que o Brasil tem, estamos organizados em 24 estados e somamos 2 milhões de pessoas atualmente.
They're organized in 24 states in Brazil, and there are more than 3 million people already part of the movement.
Basicamente, eu vou tentar ser rápida para falar da organização, porque a ideia é falar também da questão mais da terra mesmo, do acesso à terra. Nós atualmente nos organizamos nos acampamentos e depois nos assentamentos, de formas em grupos de famílias que compõem uma estrutura organizativa de um coordenador e uma coordenadora.
She's going to try to be concrete so that there's more questions from you about the movement itself. The way that they organize is by councils and by establishing families on the land.
Que discutem as necessidades do acampamento ou do assentamento e levam essas discussões para as estruturas regionais, estaduais e nacionais.
So with these councils and these families, they organize in different groups and they assess their needs, and then they take those needs to a regional and to a state-wide level.
Os acampamentos, nós organizamos acampamentos, ocupamos as terras, tanto de entidades de pessoas privadas, grandes latifundiários, que chamamos.
Yeah, these councils and families organize camps and literally occupy the land, usually owned by large landholders.
São fazendas que normalmente não cumprem uma função social, que são monocultivos, ou são terras que utilizam de trabalho escravo.
These lands are usually owned by large profiteers that don't necessarily use the land for social means.
Também terras de grandes corporações, como a Monsanto e a Araucel.
Or lands owned by corporations like Monsanto.
E também ocupamos terras públicas que o Estado não cumpre uma função com ela, né? E atualmente a gente também ocupa terras de universidades.
They also occupy public lands, usually owned by the state, but completely gone to useless, or lands that are owned by universities as well.
Atualmente nós temos um acampamento que fizemos uma ocupação numa terra da maior universidade do Brasil, que é a USP. Ocupamos cerca de 2.000 hectares de terras estão ocupados.
Right now, one of the biggest camps is over a university camp, and they are occupying more than 2,000 acres of land.
Os tamanhos dos assentamentos variam dependendo do tamanho do espaço ocupado.
The occupations vary in regards to the space that they are occupying.
E também o tempo de permanência dessas famílias no acampamento varia. Muitas vezes pode durar de 1 ano a 10 anos o acampamento.
And it also, the time that families and camps are established varies depending on the land and depending on the needs of that precise case.
Após conquistada a terra, surge o assentamento.
After settling in, they just call themselves occupiers of the land.
Tanto na fase de acampamento, enquanto estão produzidos, como já no assentamento, o trabalho é organizado da forma mais coletiva possível.
Once they are settled, they try to figure out ways to work as collectively as possible.
E se organiza tanto o trabalho quanto quem vai manejo da terra, como é feito. Muitas vezes nós chamamos assentamentos individuais, onde a terra é repartida para cada família, mas elas se organizam em formas de cooperativas, que podem ser de abrangência regional, pegar mais de um assentamento, vários assentamentos da região.
Wow, super cool. They organize the farms organize, the families organize the land management on their own, but in general the movement grows as a cooperative, so they try to, everything that they produce on the land, they try to run it and share it as a cooperative.
Dos princípios nossos que o MST carrega é a bandeira da agroecologia.
One of the main principles that the MST holds is agroecology, use of land.
Tentamos aplicar isso em todos os assentamentos, tanto na fase quando ainda é acampamento, né, mas já nos assentamentos produção agroecológica, ou que as famílias consigam produzir minimamente o que elas consomem.
So, one of the main principles is to embrace agroecological use of land and to produce organic food that is for self-consumption in the first place.
Nós entendemos que o cooperativismo é uma das formas mais avançadas que hoje existe de organização.
Yeah, they see that cooperative work is one of the best, most advanced ways of working together in these times.
É porque ele é o que torna possível você pegar famílias com um pedaço de terra e ela produzir para sustentar os seus e também fazer com que o produto dela tenha um valor agregado e ela mesma consiga produzir, transformar esse produto para vender no mercado.
Because she thinks that it's the best kind of way of approaching produce of the land that is for self-sustenance, but also could add value to those products and reach the market in a more productive kind of way.
Um exemplo muito básico é o leite.
One of the milk. One of the main products is milk.
Normalmente a maioria dos camponeses eles produzem leite. De uma forma geral, os camponeses no Brasil eles produzem leite.
Yeah, milk. There are so many producers, milk producers mainly.
E o que acontecia muito era de grandes laticínios pegarem esse leite, as famílias produziam, os laticínios passavam, recolhiam esse leite e pagavam um valor mínimo para o leite nesse produto.
What used to happen was that the milk producers would produce milk and they would just introduce their produce in the market at minimum bare profit.
Quando as famílias de vários assentamentos se organizam em cooperativa, elas conseguem, por exemplo, criar um laticínio delas mesmas, que esse laticínio vai fazer tanto o processo de coleta quanto o processo de transformação do produto e vender esse leite, e esse valor ele retorna para essas famílias.
So once they organize as cooperatives, they take the product and through different cooperation with different families, they add value to the product, and that obviously raises the cost and it's more profit for them.
É isso para nós que entendemos de reforma agrária, que não é basicamente você ter o acesso à terra, porque a terra deveria ser uma coisa, assim como o ar, ela é um bem público, todos devem ter acesso a ela. Por si só, não é o suficiente, você tem que saber trabalhar nela, produzir, como produzir em cima da terra. É isso que o MST entende como reforma agrária, você ter as condições.
One one of the understandings of agrarian reform that the MST holds is that land should be regarded as a common space, as a public space, but land by itself doesn't do much. You have to learn how to work with it and how to get into this connection with land.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask, thank you. I'm going to ask. 30 years of movement history. Thank you. In 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask one question. I'm going to open it up to the audience. As I'm listening to Joelsi talk about the MST, which is obviously kind of setting the bar for those of us interested in land reform here, I'm seeing parallels in the work that Hank and John and other cooperatives and organizations are doing here. Are you guys seeing that as well? And if so, what are you seeing?
I think for me, a very instructive element from what happens in Brazil, I guess a change catalyzed by the MST, but also, I guess, happening independently or as part of this culture there, is this notion in their state constitution, the national constitution, that if land is not used for social purposes or social good, it can be legally occupied. There's no extra legal dimension to that. And so this national context and the MST's motivation to be self-sustaining communities has converged in the success, I think, of the MST. And I think that's, we don't have that social consciousness in our constitution or in our legal system, which is a shame. Because, for example, at the Gill Tract, if there were such a legal concept in the United States operating, then what happened with the occupation and what's happening now with the farm and the ambitions that we have would not be viewed in such a hostile way by the university. It would be viewed as important. We could have a discussion about whether or not using the land for food systems, farming, agriculture, restoring traditional foodways, that kind of research, agroecology, was a higher social good than building a fake farmer's market called Sprouts on that land and a very high-end but called called affordable senior housing. So we could have a real debate, but we can't have that now.
Okay, cool. I think, yeah, there's definitely some huge structural differences and cultural differences between what's happening and what's able to happen in Brazil and what's able to happen here right now. However, those three sort of approaches to land reform, though we may not have the same legal mechanisms, those three approaches I mentioned at the beginning, taking it back, making it better, and protecting it forever, we actually do have some pretty straightforward ways to do that. We've seen that sort of playing out at the Gill Tract, and we're seeing more legal mechanisms, such as through land trusts, easements, and using land through custom to win it and hold it for the long term. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm sure you guys have a lot. We'll start over here and move this way.
Yeah, for our Brazilian friend, the attitude of the state and the government that has the police power, and that question for others is landowners in many countries where there's a shortage of land, and Brazil has a lot of land, the police power is used and occupiers are thrown out. So in Brazil, what has the state and federal governments used in terms of their police power?
He's asking a question about what kind of police power is used in Brazil.
No Brasil, a polícia também tem força, né? Ela vai muitas vezes e tira. ela faz isso. Mas atualmente, o que aconteceu que, vamos dizer, diminuiu essa repressão da polícia em cima dos movimentos, no MST? Quando a gente ocupa a terra, a polícia hoje simplesmente não pode ir lá e tirar, não consegue. Primeiro porque tem muita gente. Normalmente o MST ele coloca muita gente em cima de um espaço. Para a polícia aí teria que ser um batalhão muito grande. E segundo, há uma pressão popular muito forte. Temos advogados, temos deputados que estão juntos. Então,
there are cases in Brazil where police repression has happened, but one of the ways that the MST deals with it is by just putting so many people on a territory that it makes it hard for police to actually take out occupiers. And the other strategy that they use is just raging or encouraging social support through different means, like very on a social level, on a grassroots level, but also trying to convince politics and governors and majors to also support their cause.
Como eu disse, tem acampamentos que duram 1 ano a 10 anos. Nesse tempo, muitas vezes acontece despejo, as famílias voltam, a polícia vai e despeja, as famílias voltam. Então, assim, nós somos um movimento muito persistente.
There are camps that last 1 or 2 years, usually, and in those couple of years, of course, there are moments of confrontation with police. The families are very persistent, and the movement is very persistent, and that's one of the things that they really hold close to them, persistence.
Então, assim, há repressão. Inclusive, hoje, atualmente, não há tanto, mas existe a repressão. Já houve mais, existiu mais isso em outros governos, né? Hoje nós temos um governo dito popular, mas, assim, como diz, não faz a reforma agrária, mas também não manda a polícia bater. Então, por esse lado, vamos dizer, estamos no lucro.
Yeah, repression has happened more in the past, but now that Brazil has a popular government, it hasn't happened so often.
Mas o MST sabe que sempre quando vamos para cima de uma área, existe a possibilidade tanto do confronto com a polícia ou com os pistoleiros, não sei, jagunços, do próprio fazendeiro ou da própria empresa. Então, quando ocupamos um espaço, nós vamos preparados ou para resistir ou para ter um outro espaço para que acolha essas famílias quando isso acontece.
Whenever they are going to occupy a territory, they are very aware that confrontations might arise, and they try to come prepared either to face police repression or to face repression also from enterprises or business or agribusinesses that own the land. And they try to figure out other territories to transfer families in case there is need for that.
Yeah. So even with that sort of structural support, it's still extremely difficult. And some statistics I've heard is that only about 10% of attempted occupations are successful, and on average, each occupation is about 5 years. Is that correct? Yeah. So have we got some more questions here? Yeah.
I wanted to ask, and thank you each for the work that you've done over years to try to help life for a lot of people. Do the families make a living wage as they are working? And I guess they wouldn't pay taxes, but how does that work out? And also, how have you fought against pride and greed to, one family wants to make a little more money than another family?
Just so we're keeping track of time, we got about 3 minutes left. Okay.
salário, as famílias não recebem um salário por estarem ali, o governo não paga isso. Mas muitas vezes essas famílias, elas acabam arrumando por si só trabalhos, ou em fazendas vizinhas, ou em trabalho. São pessoas que têm uma profissão, normalmente, elas, na fase do acampamento, elas, quando não estão trabalhando a terra, ali no acampamento, elas estão tentando de alguma forma ganhar algum dinheiro para trazer para dentro da família. Essa é, creio que é a primeira pergunta.
So in terms of living wage, the government doesn't do anything about that, and the occupiers are usually people who have other types of jobs besides working the land, and that's where they get their incomes from. And there's also exchange between communities and between families, and that's also a way to sustain their needs.
Normalmente esses impostos a gente paga em tudo, mas em cima da terra não. Existe um imposto que o governo cobra, que deveria cobrar pelo menos dos fazendeiros, mas isso não é pago, normalmente não é pago, e assim quando as famílias irão assentadas, elas também não pagam imposto.
In terms of taxes, there should be a land tax charged by the government that people just don't pay.
Os assentamentos não pagam.
Yeah, the occupiers just don't pay.
Não, aqui o governo não cobra. Terra de reforma agrária, que foi destinada à reforma agrária, não paga imposto.
So anything
Que
that
em tese é uma terra do governo. Que as famílias elas têm a posse de produzir em cima da terra. A terra não é delas, é uma terra do governo que o governo destinou à reforma agrária.
Yeah, when there's land reform and the government just wants to take charge those taxes, they're just like, oh, this is public land, we're not doing.
E
sobre las dinámicas entre las familias, sobre dinámicas de poder entre familias, si en algún momento alguien quiere tener más acceso a la tierra, control sobre
não sei se eu entendi muito bem essa pergunta, mas o processo dentro da organização do acampamento, ele é feito todo um processo coletivo. Então, assim, tem os coordenadores de grupos, normalmente são um grupo de 10 ou 15 famílias, mas isso não dá direito ao coordenador ou qualquer outra pessoa ter mais acesso à terra que outra pessoa. Todos vão ter o mesmo acesso à terra. Quando aquele bem for destinado a ser assentamento, todas as famílias vão ter acesso à terra. Então, assim, não há mais poder ou menos poder. Isso não vejo isso como uma forma de poder. As famílias se organizam, escolhem seus coordenadores democraticamente. Eles lhe representam, mas apenas para levar suas decisões, não para pegar a terra em nome delas. Isso, não sei se é essa a pergunta.
Yeah, to respond to the question about families' pride and control over land, she says that it doesn't usually happen because the process of occupying the lands is such a collective democratic process that once occupiers are on the land, they are very aware that the land belongs to all and that they all should work the land in the same amount, and that it's just not a dynamic that they are used to.
Great. I'm sorry if we're out of time. Thank you very much, John, Hank, Josh, Maria. If anyone would like to have one of the green sheets with farm hours, they're up here. We've got a clipboard for those that want to stay up to date with the Giltrac's struggle. It's ongoing and is about to heat up. So go ahead and sign up here if you'd like to get updates about that.